Coming up this week on Review Ed, we'll be talking about startups, everything about startups, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll be talking about Airy Labs, there's the ugly. We'll be talking to some very successful startups, both in language and early literacy. And then we'll be taking a few minutes to talk about UCLA and the University of California. They have an entire YouTube channel now devoted to what they do and why they do it. What does all that mean, and what are the directions that's taking us? Well, let's take a few minutes to talk about Inkling and their new platform, and where that puts them in the market for e-textbooks. So join us this week on Review Ed.
This is Review Ed episode 16, recorded February 17th, 2012. EdTech Startups, the good, the bad, the ugly. This episode of Review Ed is brought to you by LanguageLab.com, bringing the world of English to you. Discover the future of online English language training and learn English in a virtual city full of real English speakers with specially designed courses for general English, business English, oil and gas, and aviation English. Visit corporate.languagelab.com and follow them on Twitter @LanguageLab. Hi everybody and welcome to Review Ed episode 16. My name is Kirsten Winkler and with me is my co-host Mr. Christopher Dawson of ZDNet and also, as always, Vice President of Business Development for WizIQ. And well, today we think we have an exciting episode for you, and we'll talk everything startups. Okay, let's start with some I think we can say big news around a particular education startup, Airy Labs. And, well, they had some big changes. Airy Labs, full disclosure here, has been in another week a sponsor of the EduQuest network. And, well, from a personal point of view, I mean, we had, with Chris, we had Alicia Chan as guest, and it seemed that she takes her work in the startup and also like research in education in general very seriously. And also from the rest of the team, I actually had a good impression. Obviously, they reacted like a young startup, but not at all in a negative way. Well, now we had to learn on a TechCrunch article and then also over at Hack Education from Audrey Waters that, well, they stripped down the team, and Alicia told me that now it is only the founder, so Andrew Su, who is still with the company, and the rest. I mean, in the TechCrunch article, everybody wanted to stay anonymous, so we don't really know. And I also have to say that I didn't talk, or I haven't talked so far with Alicia about what has happened exactly at Airy Labs. But, well, we will see if we can get her for a statement, maybe on camera or a written statement. I will definitely try that. So, yeah, I mean, this is sort of a weird story, but maybe in a startup context, a not so uncommon story that a company loses employees or fires people to change the team or to pivot in the direction of the business. It is maybe now the first wave sort of startups, where startups in education, where we have to see, well, they didn't succeed with their original idea, so maybe they have the chance to pivot, or maybe well, they will stop their activity.
Yeah.
And
I don't think this sounds like a pivot here. I wish it did, because it was a neat company with some great ideas, very promising it seemed, but boy, it sure doesn't sound like a pivot. It sounds like just a big mess, unfortunately. Which, it happens, right? I mean, there's lots of businesses with plenty of very experienced people that also wind up in big messes. So, you take some inexperienced young people, and it sounds like there may have been some family issues going on here, and other people sort of becoming involved in the business that took it in one direction that perhaps it shouldn't have gone in. Lots of issues. I mean, we all have personal issues. We all have family issues. I do my best to not mix family and business, because that never goes very well, but then I hired my son to write for WizIQ, so I don't know. We'll see how that works. But, I think that the biggest issue here is that when you are inexperienced and these young people are driven and motivated and really smart, and they've got great ideas, and sometimes they're just turned loose without mentorship. And we all need mentors in our lives. I think that those people who are really successful can point to one or two people, I certainly can, who were truly outstanding mentors and could say, "You're going down the wrong road, buddy,"
Yeah.
or hey, let's think about it this way. All it takes is a sounding board sometimes. And it sounds like in the case of Airy Labs, the only sounding board there was were parents. And I would never use my parents as sounding boards.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the TechCrunch article suggests this. I have never had contact with the parents, only with Andrew, so the founder. But I have to say, it was sort of interesting, as we had talked about a potential interview, and then so he didn't want, or he wasn't too enthusiastic, and we basically communicated via email. So, well, now with the articles and that shed a certain light on that, you always try to interpret maybe and see things. So could be one, or could be either way. And as you said, Chris, I think there are a couple of layers here. You have the tiger mom debate, so Asian parents getting involved in the careers of their kids. Then, Andrew was a very, if you want, high-profile Thiel Fellow, and the Thiel Fellowship, personally never been a big fan of that, so actively promoting telling kids to drop out of college, or at least to take a break and start businesses at a very early age, so 18, 19, 20. I think, yes, of course, it can always succeed. So you have the ones who know very early on, and who have the drive to also succeed. But I think with a certain experience that also brings a lot to the table. And as you said, Chris, having the right mentors you can surround yourself with, and who coach you. And on the other hand, this infrastructure now in education, that it seems to be incredibly easy to get substantial funding for your company. And Airy Labs also had 1.5 million, amongst others, from Google Ventures, I think. So giving lots of money to young people with maybe not giving them enough guidance, or also from the venture capitalists, or then the angel investors, I think it might have also been a certain responsibility from them. And I regularly read Mark Zuster's pieces on both sides of the table, who just recently said that he is now getting pitched by 15-year-olds, so who want to start a company. And I mean, you always have these exceptional teenagers.
Of course.
But for the vast majority, I don't know, I find early 20s already early to start your first startup. I think it's great, and also probably not wait too long, because then you have the elevated risk of maybe never doing it. But 15, 18, 19 is very early. Oh, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I look at my own kids, and they range everywhere from 2 to 19, and even my 19-year-old is he's sharp, and he's a good kid, and he's trying to just put together a community theater group, and it's a big deal to form a nonprofit right now for him and make that work. I just couldn't imagine, certainly myself at 19, being handed a lot of money.
Yeah.
And being sort of turned loose, as we're going to hear in another segment coming up that we recorded earlier. Angel investors at an early stage, they're taking a shotgun approach to investment, so they're fairly hands-off at this point. Here's some cash, good luck, you've got a good idea, let us know how it goes. And that's not going to work when you're 19 or 20. You need guidance, you need mentorship, and these whiz kids are not always social butterflies, and they're not surrounded by necessarily. They may be, and they're obviously there's exceptions to every rule. But when you're 19 and already in a grad program, you have not surrounded yourself most likely with people with a lot of life experience, and sometimes it just takes some living to make it work. So I've got to say I'm not a fan of the Thiel Fellowship either. I think that it's misguided, and I think that you learn a lot in school. Even if you choose to do school part-time or you're doing school non-traditionally, there's life experience that has to happen. And, to just jump into owning a company and running that company, maybe hire somebody who's really bright. Give them a great salary, bring those ideas on board and let them become founders eventually, but the timing's got to be right, and the experience has to be there, and the team has to be there. I mean, I look at WizIQ, and unfortunately, several months ago we lost our COO. He died unexpectedly, and but he was a rock. He was an experienced guy who knew business inside and out, and was a real guide and mentor for those who were younger in the company, and certainly our founder and CEO is very much a visionary, and it's taken us a bit to recover from that and find the people who can, really guide and look to, where Harbier was and look to what he brought to us and bring that back. And we were okay, but I think largely because of our experience with him and our time that we had with him. Without that sort of a rock, boy, this is tough. It's really tough.
Absolutely, and this is, I guess, looking at my own sort of past and career, you develop a certain feeling for people who might fit a position, or also you can imagine working together with and also giving them responsibility or not. And admittedly, some people are more mature at 19 than I personally was. I think for me it wouldn't have been the right thing, and also being handed over $1.5 million just like this. But on the other hand, then as it seems, also Andrew, maybe being this little wizard or at least very talented young man, but it sounds as also the family took care or has taken care of the money and probably also of the company in a certain, the direction of the company in a certain way. But maybe, I mean, we speculate here a little bit, and I'm sure, or I think, we will find more. We will find out more in the weeks to come.
Sure.
Maybe. Do you think taking this a little bit away from Airy Labs on a broader level, as it seems to be so good to be in education now. So a little bit different, always reminds me of the Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk, this piece when he said, oh, when you come on a party and you say you're in education, everybody wants to leave and looks for another conversation partner. Now completely the opposite. In fact, if you say, I'm in education, I'm doing something in education. Oh wow, so meaningful, so important, yeah, changing the world for the better. And I think a lot of people have drive and passion and honest feelings about education. But with every sort of good hype and good sector making progress and attracting investors, you also have the ones naturally coming who see an opportunity in the market and who maybe want to do something in education for a certain profit, building something, then selling it, and education for them is just an opportunity in the market, just like in any other market they would have been looking for their chance to make money or to sell a company. So do you think with these investors, everybody seems to be, at least in the States, but seems to be ready to invest in education and interesting amounts of money, do we risk to be really in an education bubble?
That's exactly the word I was going to use, and it seems so weird to talk about an education bubble, in a segment that's been so ignored for so long, and it's taken so long to catch up to the technology trends. It's finally happening, and we should all be shouting for joy. And yet it just doesn't feel right. When you see this sort of rapid growth, and you see money being thrown at a sector, it's setting things up for failure. And again, we'll talk shortly with some other folks who've taken a much slower approach, and when you see this kind of thoughtful, measured growth with people who have a lot of experience, with educators who have been doing this for a good long while, who really understand them. If we look at, we talked with some folks from Goldbook or from the New Ventures seed fund, but also talked about the Goldbook application. They've been teaching for a while. They've been doing this for a while, and had identified a problem based on where they were, not based on a market opportunity. And that sort of genuineness, I think, lends itself much better to a successful business, particularly in a space that relies on person-to-person contact and real understanding of the space. Education is not like other businesses. A good business person can step in and run a business and make it happen. But education has nuances that just don't exist elsewhere. And people who haven't been in the industry for a while don't understand that, are going to bring lots of good business sense, but not much education sense. And so we'll see bubbly kinds of things, which I can't get my head around an education bubble yet. But I think we're
I hope that not. But I'm sort of seeing a little bit the danger that taking the, if you will, true educators, so with an educational background, looking a little bit how they build businesses if they want to do a startup, and then also how their websites are, how they communicate. It is much more genuine for the positive side, as you say. On the other side, with positive exceptions like Goldbook, it is less sexy than other people market their ideas with a certain maybe interest for education, but not much knowledge about it, so never having worked in education. And then, as our guests this week basically say, it's all about the team, and I agree, but it seems a little bit that if you can bring over your idea in a sexy way, attractive way to investors, and usually also not having an educational background. So there again, the New Schools Venture Seed Fund is different, as they have people with an educational background in the team, but often investors only understand a very easy to digest educational idea, and not so
not
it needs to be
picture.
something with social and whatnot. Selling, of course, selling lesson materials and so on. Yeah, that's easy to understand. So we invest. It's the size of a market. This is the business, and then it's okay for us to invest. So not having the big picture, how you said what dynamics are in education and how it actually works, and it's complex. It's complicated.
It is complicated, and sales cycles are weird, and it's a hard spot to sell in, and it's a hard spot to work in, and it's of course you get every politician and every high profile business person, and Bill Gates and whomever, all focusing on education.
Yeah.
So obviously we want to run with this, but then when it comes down to actually making something happen, when it comes down to really putting the rubber to the road and having this business be successful in selling to educators, well, ideas are all well and good, but if there aren't budgets to back it up, and if there aren't pedagogical models to make it work, you've just invested in something that was a pretty cool idea that somebody had, and that couldn't really make it. And those sorts of cool ideas are very hard for a non-educator to kind of sort out and to see where things might go wrong. So, I think that the trend is positive, but I think that it's simply a matter of investors having to adjust to the fact that, you're going to need to have an educator on staff. This is what you're going to specialize in. This is what you want to take some time and devote several $1 million to. Why don't you get a teacher on board? Why don't you ask a teacher? Ask a seasoned administrator, someone who's been, a college provost. Talk to some people, not just, hey, it's social, it's educational, I'm there, here's $1 million. It's got to be beyond that.
Yeah, and also probably that you won't get a return on your investment as quickly as it is possible in some other markets.
Amen. Absolutely. Right. Be patient.
Okay, so that was a pretty heavy topic right at the beginning. Let's take a short break and thank our sponsor for this week, languagelab.com. Language Lab, we had them on previous episodes, and today I can tell you that they have added a new, not new language, but aviation English to their portfolio. And, we all know that it's costly and somewhat maybe also complicated to put the pilots or aspiring pilots in the flight simulators. So what you can do or in Language Labs English City is to practice your aviation English in this virtual environment and on a virtual plane, and with real people, teachers, instructors, playing characters, and therefore prepping you for your future career as a pilot. And I think, but we will probably get used to more of these initiatives, I think. But it's pretty exciting what you can use technology for, to also practice your language skills, and may it be general English or professional English. So I kind of like it, and I think it's an interesting, fascinating approach. And sometimes I wonder why other people didn't take advantage of it or do it earlier, when you then have a not so complicated, rather simple idea, and it seems to work. So they have a lot of students in English City, and now also companies who say, yeah, we see the benefit in this language training in a virtual environment. And you say, why didn't it exist before? And I mean, yes, I understand our computers and technology makes quick process and progress, and a few years ago it wasn't possible, but yeah, from the idea itself, it's somewhat a logic consequence, at least for me.
It seems like it was an idea whose time came a while ago, but whenever I hear about the new applications of Language Lab, I'm always surprised that no one bothered before. With WizIQ, a lot of people who do writing for us are in India, and my Indian colleagues speak wonderful English, but spoken English and American English are two very different things oftentimes, and a tool like this would be hugely helpful to expose somebody to different flavors of English. There's perfectly correct technical English, and then there's the way we speak, and something that's going to be natural and resonate with readers of something on a website or a blog, for example. So obviously different settings that can expose you naturally to language. Makes sense to me.
Okay, so if you're interested, visit their site, languagelab.com, or find them also on the various social networks or in social media in general, as always, at Language Lab. And we thank them for their support, continued support of Review Ed and EduQuest as a network for this week again. In our next segment, we talk with a Finnish startup founder. His name is Jani Penttinen. He is the founder and CEO of Transfluent.com, and Transfluent are in the sort of, or it seems to be very attractive market of translation on the internet. So let's see what he has to share with us. All right, everyone. Now, for this segment of Review Ed, we are connected with Jani Penttinen. I covered his startup on EduQuest. I think we also did questions with Jani previously for my personal blog. And he is the founder and CEO of Finnish startup Transfluent.com. And just briefly, what they do is they offer businesses timely translations by professional human beings for their either Twitter accounts or Facebook status updates, or also messages they want to display on their websites, obviously. And as I said, this in a very short time frame, and basically they have a large network, or they have established a large network of translators from all over the world, and Jani is actually speaking with us from Singapore at the moment. So thanks for accepting talking with us so late at night. And what's the reason that you are actually in Singapore currently?
We are actually we are expanding our business here. We see Asia as one of the most exciting markets for translations these days. A lot of exciting companies coming from here that have excellent products that they want to sell worldwide, but the language barrier is kind of always on the way, especially these days with social media. You cannot just put a static message out there. You have to use social media, constantly updating messaging, replying to your fans, and kind of like Europe has been doing this for a long time. US is kind of not there yet, but Asia is where it really is beginning to grow.
I actually thought it might be the other way around, that you are actively looking for translators, as this is probably a good time for the States, and then sort of getting timely or time-sensitive messages translated from Asians, as we often hear that in the Philippines they do a lot of English training and also translation services. So, but it's more for businesses.
Yeah, actually for us, we're pretty strict about that. If we translate something to a language, then we expect the translator to be native speaker, professional translator living in the area. So we're not buying translations from India, Philippines. We basically, our network has 15,000 translators all over the world. So yeah, really the reason I'm here is because of the business that is here, not because of the translators.
I see.
15,000 translators. That's an incredible scale. How did you get there?
Well, they are freelancers, obviously. I mean, it's not like they are working for us full time. They're doing other gigs too, but we are connected to them so that whenever we need a translator, anytime, 24 hours a day, there's always somebody available. So that gives us an average turnaround time of just 15 minutes. And in major languages, we typically can do it in about 5 minutes if it's a short message.
And
so, that's just necessary.
Yeah. So the big news I just saw on Twitter yesterday is that Transfluent, you are providing the translations that go out from the Obama_ES Twitter account to the world. So obviously I think we have two big things here. We all know that the Hispanics are a big group of the population in the States, but now also acknowledging, I think, that they are as important or so much power, and of course are important to get their votes and also to get your message across, that the Obama people have been famously for his first campaign, of course, used social media in a very active and innovative way. So probably it is only consequent that they now also do something for this specific group. How did you attract their interest, and how did you convince them that this is a great way to connect with this part of the population for the election this year in the States?
Well, I think it's no secret that it's been in the news a lot that Hispanic voters are going to play a major role this time in the elections, and but we actually just started doing it by ourselves. So we first started translating, and then we got in touch with the campaign because obviously I'm sure they get a lot of inbound messaging, people offering to do this and that for them. So we decided it's better to just start doing it and then show them how well it works. And currently, Don't get me wrong. It's not an officially endorsed Twitter account, at least not yet. So we've shown it to them, sort of got an approval to keep going. They didn't ask us to stop doing it, and now they are, hopefully. Hopefully, I mean, because obviously it doesn't hurt them. It's been gaining a lot of followers over the past few days. And we started to see some buzz in the Twitter about it. So I think it is going to be quite a major thing, and it would be great if they officially acknowledged the importance of this by endorsing it. But I think just by doing it, we are already raising the voice for the Hispanic population. So no matter what the outcome, we're already made a change here. We've been able to achieve something.
Definitely.
Well, I mean, it's quite clear that it's going to be a very, very close election, and obviously anything that the campaign can do that would differentiate themselves from the Republican side, which has really struggled with Well, their immigration policy and any number of bits of foibles around the Hispanic community. This is one more step. So I can't imagine why they wouldn't say yes, please, please help us.
Yeah. And also, one thing to be clear, we are not endorsing either of the parties, so we'd be open to do this for anyone. We just chose to do this for Obama because there's been such an amount of talk about how he really should think of the Hispanic population more. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where this goes. If we get a call from the Republicans asking for the same, then they will say yes. We're not sided on this. We are finished. Right? We don't even get to vote. So we just want to basically help more people get their voice heard.
And from the practical side, who is currently translating? And when they put out a tweet, how fast do we have to imagine? Is it being translated by a Transfluent translator or freelancer, as you explained before, in like a minute, or is it more a time frame of 5 minutes, 10 minutes for a tweet? Give us some backing.
Yeah, how does the queue actually work?
Yeah.
Right.
It seems to be about 5 minutes right now, and it's quite easy for you to check. Just open up Obama's official Twitter feed side by side with Obama_ES, and whenever he says something, just turn on the timer, and you'll see it. In about 5 minutes. Sometimes it's been 3, 4, 5 minutes. You'll see that in perfect Spanish. So it's actually quite a magical thing how it works.
And it's on a first come, first served basis from the translator side?
How you mark the translator. They're all professionals. We don't basically assign a translator in a campaign or a Twitter feed. Just whoever happens to be available. That's the secret behind the speed that we are able to achieve.
Okay, let's see. Now, as startups, education startups is our big topic, and there has been, at least in our little part of the internet, quite some news and controversy around the Thiel Fellowship, very young startup founders in education, the natural mistakes they make, and sort of I see, and Chris and I are going to talk more about this later, so some natural pivots, and let's talk a little bit about how it was for CH and Transfluent, because on the one hand, as I understood it, and I mean in our previous talks, you raised your money like before the hype, if you want, around you have to do something in education and sort of something maybe in languages. And do you think it is always more important to find the right investors for your startup? Was it good for you personally as a company as well to raise before? Maybe that your investors are more patient, and do you think now education has become this big thing? You basically have to do something this year in education, that those young startups may feel more pressure from their investors, and also that they don't get enough guidance from experienced serial entrepreneurs or experienced people to lead a startup or young company in that space, particularly in general. So what's your take on that, Jani?
Well, yeah, that was a long question. Let's see. So
yeah, it's a lot of I think things involved here, and very nuanced, and
right.
A lot of layers to deal with. So it's obviously also not a simple answer.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, we raised money for CH earlier, and then we spent all the money, and we didn't really get to a point where we would effectively monetize CH. We got like 1 million users, and it was doing fine, except that it didn't really make money. That's why we pivoted. Basically, we changed direction. We started doing Transfluent, which is the same idea, bringing down the language barriers, but for businesses instead of consumers. And that has, turned out to be extremely monetizable, very, very much a growth business right now. As what it comes to like the timing of raising money, well, we actually raised another round just before the end of the year, just a couple months ago. And it was much easier. I don't know if it's the timing or not, but we announced, just put out the word that we were looking to raise a little money, and in just 1 week we got twice as much commitments as we could take in. So definitely today is a good day. It's a good time to raise money for this type of companies, be it education or be it translations. And I think, yes, it matters what type of investors you get in, but it doesn't matter all that much in early stage. We raised from a number of individual angels who each are now helping us, and giving us connections, but they don't really mess with the business directions. These are folks who invest in, tens of companies. They don't actively go and hassle with the companies they invest into. So it's sort of a safe bet. They want to see if they can trust you, trust the team, and then they just let you go, and they give you connections. They open doors. They help out if they can. But I don't really see it as a risk. I think it's when you are able to raise money, then by all means go and do it. Then when you go for the next round, Series A, get VCs involved, then that may be a different thing. But we're not there quite yet. We are approaching to that point, so then we have to be careful who we work with, because hopefully those will be the guys who can take us to the next step. But we'll see about that when we get to that point.
You are a founder team, and if you look, each of you has had their career. Transfluent has taken off rapidly. So for your investors, I mean, you were able to show what you had previously done as individuals, and also to prove that the business model of the company seems to work. So targeting businesses and offering them quick and professional translations. So I am not sure that the investors always think very intensely about what's it like for young people, because you're somewhat experienced in a natural way, because you made this evolution. You are all in your early 30s, so it is different than a 19 or 20-year-old. And so therefore, I am not sure if we, for example, taking the Google example, if they hadn't had Eric Schmidt as CEO over a period of years, that Google under Larry Page would have grown as quickly, or maybe in the same way as we now see his style as the CEO is very different.
That's something we will never know. I mean, the same way you could look at Facebook and see, you could ask, what if Mark wasn't there at the top? What if they hired a senior guy to run the company? They probably would have sold already. So sold out or whatever, IPO'd too early. So I think it's all about an individual. I don't think the age really matters at all. A young guy, the problem is you don't have the experience But if you happen to get on the right path and have the right people around you, the age is not really. It's a matter of getting more experience and being in the right place. Some people have to try out 2 or 3 times before they find the right product. But I think, me being in the mid-30s, I don't feel like I'm old, or I still keep making the same not the same mistakes, but new mistakes. It's all about being an entrepreneur. Is all about trying to find new ways, reinvent yourself, and kind of find ways to make a business work. So, yeah, I think those 18, 19-year-olds, they have the same chance of being successful if they are surrounded by the right people. Basically, this is team game. It's not about an individual who's running the business.
Then my at least last question for you is how important is the pivot? Because you explained in your previous answer that you raised money and CH went well in terms of users. It just didn't generate the money in the end you had hoped for. And then having the flexibility to pivot, was this more a team decision? And once again, your investors let you do what, so trusted you and you could do what you felt was right? Or what was this sort of process? How was it happening?
I was lucky enough to have the people around me understand the situation, and it was my call that we start doing Transfluent type of business. Fortunately, the people around me supported me in that. The board, the investors, everybody just let me go with it, and it turned out to be the right decision. But if we hadn't done that, then basically we were at the dead end. We might find a way to survive, obviously, but I don't think there was a path for great growth anymore. We basically explored that and we found out it doesn't work. So it's always better to do something else then. And fortunately, Transfluent is very much to the core of what we were doing before. So all the things we learned, a lot of things we've built, we've been able to bring in. So we didn't have to start from scratch. We had the same team. We've been pretty lucky, I would say, with this. So we were able to, over the first 3 years of the company, we gathered a lot of experience and information, and then we were able to find a business model that we can apply this expertise to. So I think it's a pretty perfect way to go.
Yeah, it turned out the perfect way for you at least, which is great, of course. Yeah. Chris, any other questions for you?
Just one last question. So, if you had parting words of advice for a very young entrepreneur, someone without the experience of having tried this a few times and gone through the creative destruction process and trying to make it work, what were in a nutshell? What's your words of advice?
No, it's basically listen to people around you. Try to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, who you trust and who trust you. It's kind of lonely when you're an entrepreneur. It's good to be able to ask for advice every now and then, and don't try to do everything by yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Obviously, at the end of the day, you are responsible for things you do, but it doesn't mean that you cannot ask for some help sometimes.
Excellent.
So once again, everybody who wants to follow the currently still unofficial, however professionally translated Obama tweets in English, that's Obama_ES. And in Spanish, I should say, so from English to Spanish. And otherwise, the website is transfluent.com. You also have, all the various Transfluent accounts, always, I think, with underscore, and then the language. So
exactly.
Jani's Twitter is at Jani Penttinen, so with double T. Anything else you would like to point people to?
No, our website has just about everything. So transfluent.com, it has all the contact information, all the different Twitter accounts. Just go there, get in touch, and if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. We'll be happy to answer anything.
Well, thank you, Jani, so much for taking the time talking late at night, and then the best of success in Singapore and for the next ventures.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Very nice meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Then we had the opportunity to speak with the co-founders of Jazzles, which is early literacy initiative. Quite a little bit of content around early literacy, songs, multimedia, you name it. And so they take a different approach as startup founders. They are experienced educators and experienced business people who have also done this, found ways to surround themselves with the right contacts. So we got to hear their story next. Well, then I want to welcome our two guests for today, Kevin Condon and Lesley Beth. They are the founders of Jazzles, which is an early literacy program that uses song and video and animations to teach early literacy. And this is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. I spent an awful lot of time deep in the DIBBLES data that kind of flowed through me as a district administrator and data coordinator. And it was quite obvious looking at the DIBBLES data that we had, just there were a few kids who were doing brilliantly, but there were so many kids who would struggle and who continued to struggle year after year after year. So I actually met Kevin through my work at WizIQ, and they had approached us about using our platform as a hosting medium and as a way of training and doing lots of different things with Jazzles. But I wanted to speak to them sort of in the context today, one, to talk about Jazzles, but two, to speak to them in the context of startups, which really is our theme for this week on Review Ed. So first of all, let me just introduce or hand it over to them, really. Kevin and Lesley, would love to have your thoughts and your perspective on everything from what a little rundown on Jazzles and the history and where it came from, and some of the pedagogy behind it, where you've had success, where you've had struggles, and then maybe take some time and start talking about the business side of things, because our whole focus this week really is startups and what's going right and what's going wrong. So I'd love to have your perspectives on that.
Okay, well, Lesley, of course, is the teacher. She's done 25 years teaching kindergarten, and I do the business side. So we'll hand over to Lesley to talk about everything in terms of the pedagogy, etc. But I would just like to comment on one thing that you just discussed, Kristen. That was the issue of DIBBLES and results. And I think one of the things that was very evident right when we started, actually even before we had multimedia, was that there was a little Baptist church in West Virginia. I think the average wage of the families was something like about $13,000, and they had a huge problem with kids during the summer. And they started to use Jazzles. All the kids came to school. They kept off the street. They didn't do drugs. The school teacher was so impressed with it. And she wrote to us and she said, I've had children on the honour roll who've never been on the honour roll before. And we thought that was a lovely experience. Those stories we can repeat over and over, but I will just come back to DIBBLES and one result. In 2008, we had two theses. Lesley can talk to you a little bit more about that if you wish. But one of them was from a school in Missouri. And 50% of the children, this was in a kindergarten class, came in, 50% of them were on school lunch programs, so they came from very poor backgrounds. Within the first 14 weeks of the school year, so that was even before the end of December, nearly half of those kids had reached the year-end literacy standards using Jazzles. And a lot of that was to do, as Lesley will discuss, through kinetic engagement. in another school in San Antonio, 95% Hispanic children. Now, these are pre-K children. They started school at 3.5 years, I think 3 years old actually, but certainly 3.5-year-old. And they achieved 2 years standards in the first year. And one of the greatest things that the teacher said to us was that she saw them change from being shy, sort of like dispossessed kids into fully confident kids. And they learned so much through the Jazzles program, and of course through the teacher, because I mean, Jazzles is the resource, and the teacher is the teacher. We hear a lot about quality in teachers and poor teachers, etc., etc. We hear very little about the quality of the curriculum, and I think that's what we've got to offer. And at that stage, I think, Lesley, I should shut up.
So, no, that's no problem. Lesley, can you start by giving us kind of a little rundown of really what Jazzles is all about and how you kind of came to this program?
Sure. Well, I came to the, I started out by writing songs, a literature of alphabet songs, because I was teaching kindergarten at the time, and I thought I knew the power of singing to learn and memorise, so I thought, wouldn't it be great if you had a little song that actually made sense? And it was alliterative, so we taught all the letters of the alphabet. So that's sort of where it began. Then from then, I expanded the program out, so it became a holistic program. Everything radiates out from each song, so everything that is done is thematic and a holistic program. So even though it is targeting learning to read skills, it actually encompasses a lot of areas in the curriculum as well. For instance, I'll get into the learning styles, because that's a very important thing to cater for every kid's learning style. So with the songs, once they became animated, you have the visual engagement, you have the oral, because they're singing and hearing the songs, and then if you add the kinetic activity, which kids will automatically do with catchy music anyway, a bit of tapping or clapping or percussion, a bit of percussion there. And I always insist on making up actions. So to each song, I would get the kids to make up actions that helped explain the words as well, even though the vision of the animation explains the words very well anyway. That actually adds to it, because then you've got this kinetic activity. So as everywhere throughout the program, you've got that combination of visual, oral and kinetic activity. So all those children who have had to sit still and just listen, and usually they're the mischievous ones that are not focused, you can't get them to concentrate, you've got them. So the power of Jazzles, I think, is in the engagement. You have minimum behavioural issues when you've got every kid engaged. And the music, of course, has got that beautiful thing of focusing group, which is, you know, when you go to rock concerts and things like that, you see everybody engaged, everybody's happier, and so you've got those qualities of music involved in the education process. But then inbuilt into the songs are all these big ideas of reading. So every time you see an animation, you're actually learning alphabetic principle about letters and their sounds, because each alliteration has a highlighted initial letter, so they're seeing it and hearing it. So that's a lot of intuitive learning is happening throughout. Now, so we've got sorry.
What are those? All these songs are called something, and Kevin told me that the name a long time ago. But those jingles that get in your head that you can't get out. There's a name for that.
Repetune.
Thank you.
And musical hooks, because every song is a different musical style, and they've got musical hooks in them. That's what the kids end up doing. And I've had teachers say to me, I couldn't get that song out of my head. You know, I was singing it all last night. Even when we were recording, the guy in the recording studio said, I was singing that song all night, I couldn't sleep. So, and the kids, you'll find the kids singing it out in the playground. We had a case of one teacher overseas, an ESL. She was teaching children, ESL children with, non-English speaking children. And she said, I thought some of the words might have been a little bit too hard for them because I don't baby down the language. There's words like extraordinary and amazing and things like that. But she found the kids, they'd learnt the Boo Bus Blues song. Mm-hmm. And later on she came past the bus stop and then they were singing the Boo Bus Blues song. So
this is in a remote village in China.
Nice. Well, then let's take a moment and turn then to more the business side of things. You know, as you are pulling this together, obviously some of the greatest businesses that we've seen and talked to on Review Ed have started generally with a teacher who encounters a problem and has an idea, but all too often it's very difficult to make that into a reality. So how have you guys gone about making this a reality and getting it out there?
Well, I think, Chris, that is the nub of it, because we started Jazzles in 2000. We actually had a lot of success. We sold the program just as audios and activity books to thousands of teachers in Australia, in America, and in India, I should say. We can always come back to India later on. But the difficulty really was as soon as the No Child Left Behind Act came in, and I think that favoured particular publishers, then our POs just sort of completely collapsed and slowly it died. And we really recognised that we'd have to go multimedia. We developed a DVD. We had the whole thing, everything done. We had Toys R Us. The president of Toys R Us wanted Jazzles so much to compete with Leapfrog, I can't tell you. But we actually gave that DVD away because of piracy. You know, like 95% of stuff is pirated. We just didn't want to do it. So we set up a website where you really cannot download to your computer our resources. But in the end, we recognized that to get the volume and to keep nimble, because, I mean, there's new operating systems. I mean, how long's Apple iPad been around? Just 2 years or something like that. We just couldn't do that. So we separated out the technology side from, if you like, the content generation side. And we decided to find a specialist in digital delivery, and we found that, a company, relatively a small company in the North American market. It's called Core Learning. They're based up in Toronto. But Doug Hatch, who's the CEO, he has spent 5 years developing digital relationships with people like Intel, Intel classmate, Intel, they have an Intel publishing division. He knows every one of those people. And he's built a SCORM-compliant learning management system. And just recently, actually, it's come to our knowledge, and his knowledge, I guess, that there are very, very few. In fact, I think he is the only company to actually have well over some thousands of resources that can run on a SCORM-compliant system, right? Evidently, that is just very uncommon. And he's winning contracts on that. And the other thing that he's taught me, which isn't mind-boggling, I guess, but I think if we had been going by ourselves, we would have gone down trying to get Scholastics to do it. We did, in fact. But these publishers, I really think Kodak, the word Kodak comes to mind. They're very established. I don't think they've really recognised where digital content is going. They don't have their hearts in it, really. They're still waiting to the books side, publishing side of it. Doug Hatch isn't. And he's taught me about bundling. I mean, he's got bundling agreements now with computer companies and stuff like that, which goes into the tens. I wouldn't even say 20 million. I'd say multiple, nearly 100 million computers in a year, right? So, I don't think we could ever have done that without someone like Doug. And now he's got us we're going into Android. We're developing, we'll have ready in about 3 or 4 weeks, apps for Kindle, and we're doing our iPad apps too. So, you've just got to be so nimble, and you've got to have resources. We could not run learning management system and power it on our resources to reach 500,000 kids a year. We just couldn't do it.
Excellent.
So that's our business. That's been our business proposition. We may earn less money, but ultimately we earn more money. And we don't have to worry about sleeping at night and where has the server gone down. You know all about that.
Well, it's all about the cloud. That's great. No, I'm really I'm glad to hear that things are going well, and it seems like a very reasonable approach. Really, I mean, it's all too often I think sometimes startups' eyes are a little bigger than their bellies, so to speak, and you've built this sort of from the ground up. It seems to be working well. So I wish you the very best, and look forward to hearing more about Jazzles in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, from the talk with the Jazzles founders, when you watched the video and you saw Lesley and Kevin, of course they have started their venture at a later point in their career. Do you know what I didn't get from the interview? What was sort of the original technical setup you need for Jazzles? As Kevin talked a little bit about selling CDs and also DVDs or CD-ROMs, but how did they talked about the adoption of the product of the songs at schools with low income families or in low income environments. So what did they need? Did they need a cassette recorder, a CD player, and then just microphones, or how is it working?
They finally settled on Flash, actually. So I think that they had taken the more traditional approach of using printed or pressed media, and then an optical media, and then they realized they needed to just move it online so that they could still be on a single computer in front of a classroom if that's the only resource that the kids had. But the idea was really they needed to move to something that could be rich and interactive but still online. So they have everything from puzzles that get put together with that go along with the songs, all the way to just the simple animations and cartoons that accompany the songs, which is actually why they're using WizIQ, because you can embed Flash media into the virtual classroom.
It's not dead.
It isn't dead. It isn't dead. It's still there, and I maintain my faith in Flash, but fortunately, be in the wrong company, I suppose. But so that's why they moved onto a Flash platform, though they felt like it was ultimately the most scalable. And if they ever wanted to go back to an optical medium, then it's very easy to just port that right out. So that's what they finally chose, and it seems to be replicable and working quite nicely for them. Teachers like it. It's easy. It's ubiquitous. So
do they sell directly to the individual teachers, or do they target schools as a whole, or even districts?
Right now, they're targeting daycare centers. They're targeting private preschools, school districts, of course. But because they're focused on pre-K and kindergarten, this early literacy and early phonics, they're targeting the people who are seeing those kids the most. Homeschoolers definitely are a big part of their audience. But yeah, they're looking to expand now into more mainstream curricula. And as you mentioned, they got hooked up with Scholastic, but really I think they're finding the most success, reaching out directly to teachers and being able to be a valuable resource as teachers try and figure out the best way to teach kids to read. One thing I learned from a reading specialist I worked with for a long time was that most elementary school teachers take take a course in reading. That's it. And, and then they give them the responsibility of teaching young people to read. And there's a huge amount of science behind it. And it's, all the tools they can have at their disposal, obviously is a useful thing. So I think that's where they're finding success, is people who may not have a master's degree in reading instruction. They're actually few and far between. So.
And being sort of more an amateur in the field, but the songs are definitely sticky, so I listened to the Blue Bus and to the Orange Octopus, and it's very nicely done. And, Kevin and Lesley, from the business side, so they're also not ignoring the new times, if you will. As they tell us in the interview segment, well, they are now heading iPad and also Android applications. I was wondering a little bit from the business side. Well, apparently they have found the right partner to probably also think about distribution, bundling, and so on. iPad, as great as it might be, and I'm definitely a fan, but it will probably exclude the lower income or more difficult community schools and so on. So, but it could, on the other hand, also open them or Jazzles to a new group of potential customers, who maybe even parents who simply want to get the applications for their kids. And then, I mean, today an article made the round on the internet of iPads now being used as babysitters. So why not keep the kids engaged? And
the parents who can afford iPads are going to very often be the ones who want their kids to have that head start. And you know, whether they're babysitters or not, which unfortunately they can become all too easily, you know, there's a very large market for parents who want to push their kids, you know, further ahead. Also, in terms of English as a second language, seeing lots of applications for Jazzles there. So maybe slightly older kids, or kids who are you know, whether they're in affluent communities or not, coming in and needing to learn English and learn it in a simple and straightforward way. So, yeah, I think that there's definitely a market there. So, several markets, in fact.
The only, coming back to our previous talk about sexiness, so this is probably the only thing they have to sort of elaborate on a little bit. It may not be as important for teaching professionals to have the most newly designed website. I think for parents choosing applications for their children, the design is increasingly getting important.
It is.
And having or following the newest, not only design, but also usability standards and so on. So, but
Well, I think that comes back to the same idea of finding the right people to be on your team, you know, and I'm struggling with this right now in a side project I'm working on, but finding the people who can bring the right design sense, the right technical sense, you know, the right educational sense, the right usability. I mean, all of these things, the psychology of all of this, you know, you've got to find the right team, and it's really, really hard with a startup. I think very often you have your vision and you're trying to take this vision forward. But again, as we heard, you don't have to do it all yourself, and it's okay to ask for help. I think it's such a great message from Jani, that it really, really critical. Ask for help and find the right people. You don't need to do everything.
You cannot.
No.
It is probably one of the most important lessons to learn in a startup, that you really have to manage to find the right people you want to work with. Ideally, people who are smarter than you, and really have the right dynamics and the right team around you. And it's probably a huge part of the success of certain startups.
Yeah, well, I think it's you know, looking at the young people who are doing startups now, there's ego involved there as well. You have to be able to set aside your ego. You know, that's when you hand a 19-year-old $1.5 million, for example, you know, that strokes the ego a little bit, and that ego has to go away. And you have to think about the business, think about what you're doing, think about your mission and your goals and your objectives, and who can help you achieve that. Not I'm a startup founder, you know, and that's a very hard thing for the average young person to do.
The feeling I had about Eric Schmidt being the former CEO for Google, that Larry Page, of course, grew in his role and now has a very distinct style of leading. And well, we will see if and how he proves himself to lead Google. I think it wasn't the worst or even a bad decision to have an experienced CEO, maybe a little less creative, but definitely a person who knows how to execute. And I think, as Schmidt himself also always said, now is the right point to make the transition, and that's what they did.
They're ready, and
yeah,
right, and it seems to be working just fine. You know, it's funny. Worcester Polytechnic Institute, they've done a lot of research on the students that they bring in. So we're talking about a university that's very focused on on tech, on startups, on engineering. The kinds of folks who are going to go out and start companies and do great things. And so they used to be very, very focused on SAT scores. That was their number one entry criteria for the school. And so they start tracking their students and doing personality tests on them and Myers-Briggs assessments. And what they realized is that they had a lot of very, very bright people who were all sitting kind of one quadrant of Myers-Briggs. And they were taking 5, 6, 7, 8 years to finish school, or they didn't finish school and they'd go off and get bored and go do something else. And these people were brilliant, but they couldn't complete anything. And as a person who did very well in the SATs and struggles to actually complete anything, they actually changed their entry criteria to look at people who maybe had far worse scores, but who had a demonstrated history of being able to execute. And so now they have a very well-balanced business school there, and a really great MBA program that's made up of people who are both brilliant visionaries and the people who can help them get the job done. It takes a team, once again.
Absolutely. So I think there was actually a very good line, so I'm not going to add anything. It just takes more than a simple test score. We have 2 more stories for you. Inkling have just announced that they launched their platform for publishers. And so Matt McInnes, the CEO of Inkling, basically, if you see and compare Inkling with the other textbook publishers, I have always liked them for their sort of really innovative approach, making beautiful digital or e-textbooks and books, and also, well, they have a cookbook as well. But we are in education, so let's talk about the textbooks. And up to now, it has always been sort of my little worry that they might not be able to scale as well as compared with companies like No or also Scroll Motion, who simply put out books and books and books and can say, so we have a portfolio of so and so many thousands of books on the platform, whereas Inkling always seemed at least to take the approach of doing book by book and coming up with a beautiful result, but it takes longer, and it was just not as scalable as maybe the others. So do you think, Chris, that now giving publishers the opportunity, this could potentially, or has the potential to change for Inkling, that they can also scale like the other big guys?
I think so, and perhaps, I mean, if they can still bring that sensibility to the textbook publishers who have so often just kind of created PDFs of their textbooks and called that the e-textbook and sold it for the same freaking price, which, don't even get me started on that. If they can bring the sensibilities of these Inkling books to scale, and I think they can. I think it makes sense. If you've created a platform, you've devoted the time to making these tools public and making these tools available, in a very straightforward way, and publishers can then hook right into that, or I would expect we'll see the ability for individual, more sub-publishing in this manner as well. I think, the potential is very much there for them to take this forward. Will they ever reach the scale of some of their competitors? I mean, No has, several million books out there, I think. Maybe they don't need to. It's okay to be smaller but different and cover a niche. There's always going to be smaller publishers who are more inclined to do something really special and perhaps even charge a little bit more for that, and you pay for the experience. A book should be an experience, and I think we've when we all hold a book in our hands, those of us who love to read, there's an experience there, and there's no reason not to take that forward into the text that we have our students pay exorbitant sums for, or that schools pay a lot of money for. It should be an experience.
I think it is in their own interest to keep the quality up high and to guide and maybe even control the publishers a little bit in terms of what they want to publish with Inkling or on the Inkling platform, and to, as you said, as this is really Inkling's unique selling proposition and what makes them different from other textbook publishers or e-textbook publishers, is this that the books are, feel like they have a little bit of more love to them or work invested than some other folks maybe who can argue we have a couple of million books on our platform, which is also a convincing argument to many people. So Inkling really has to continue focusing and making a good job of really addressing what
their
they
unique
are,
strengths.
what they make different, and why it is maybe good to be smaller, like you said, Chris, and not necessarily having or competing with now I have 100,000 and I have 500,000 or a million.
Right, don't need to play the numbers game. It's be the best, and it certainly worked for Apple. So
Absolutely,
I think not to bring Apple into this because I don't even want to get started on the Apple Books thing again. But it's
still one of the most loved brands. People without thinking buying every new Apple product, and we will see that with the launch of the, and I think it is safe to say, with the launch of the iPad 3 in just a few weeks. So.
Yeah, I already have my iPad headed to Gazelle, so I'm going to follow the trend too. I might have to. I don't love the iPad.
The iPad 2 on
I have a couple of the iPad 2s because you can never have too many. And I must say I'm not a huge fan of iOS. I like Android better. I will take my Zoom places that I won't take my iPad. But the iPad is the iPad. What am I going to do? Not buy it? Come on.
Yeah,
So,
we still buy it. So
all for the sake of research.
Works this all every time.
It does. They figured it out.
Yeah. Okay, our last story for you today is the University of California launching their UCTV Prime, a university-run YouTube original channel. So, and in a broader sense, we see, particularly speaking of Netflix for our US audience, Netflix now experimenting with their own original series, first series, Lilyhammer, and I think they will also launch House of Cards this year. And so, Chris, what do you think? Is there potential for professionally made stories, news around campus life? And I think they are planning short 10-minute in-depth portraits, probably what is going on and what matters to students on the campuses of the University of California, and having this on YouTube. I mean, the first thing I was thinking of, this could be a good promotion and maybe showing how attractive the University of California is for its students, and also maybe showing people not so familiar with what opportunities you have on campus, just showing what they do, and maybe also showing a certain difference and even just having better information compared with other campuses in the
Yeah, well,
country.
you know, I think there's a few pieces here. There's certainly alumni relations, and alumni donate more to higher profile schools that are doing innovative and wonderful things. The University of California schools have obviously turned out a whole lot of Hollywood types and folks who are in the entertainment industry. And again, being able to connect with those very wealthy alumni is very, very important.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is a recruitment tool. UCLA and UC Berkeley don't have any trouble filling their seats, but some of the other schools certainly do. Given the economy, and particularly the economy in California, they need to fill seats. So, as a recruitment tool, it's also very useful. But I think this points to a much larger trend in entertainment, and I know that Google would love to see this be the case. I think we're going to see a lot more original programming coming to us through YouTube, and we're already seeing it in many forms, and certainly seeing it as the content providers themselves, whether it's Netflix or DirecTV, some of these other providers are coming up with original content. The networks, the broadcast networks, are increasingly unimportant. And there was actually a feature on NPR just this morning about how cable networks have been able to take a traditionally dead Friday night time slot and crank out some big hit television shows, largely because people just DVR them now because they're interesting, and there's an opportunity for disruption and for really entering the market. The same is going to happen as we get more and more IPTVs, connected televisions, and we spend more time on an iPad or a smartphone or a tablet than we do in front of a television. So this is just the beginning edge, the tip of the iceberg, I think, in terms of original content being generated.
Yeah, I think if you are not a huge fan of sports, you can probably really make the transition relatively easily and cut the cords and consume it on the internet. And yes, we have seen that Google took some or YouTube took some famous YouTubers with a lot of following and let them create like original channels for YouTube, and I think this is a whole trend, and I am not yet sure about what Google's plans or YouTube's plans are for the education sector, and I think we had this a couple of shows ago that they now also have this YouTube Edu, but since then I haven't heard that much about it, if it's being accepted well or if there's a lot going on. So, I mean, yes, having sort of a section or a few channels from universities and having reporting from campus, I can imagine quite a few people taking this in, students, maybe parents interested, so
it's all about monetizing content, and then being sticky and finding the right sets of eyes, and this is what Google does, and they do it very, very, very well. It's really to our benefit though as consumers, if this means that instead of watching, I don't know, whatever show I might be watching, I'm watching something happening at UCLA or some great cultural event they're sponsoring or what's going on, or I'm watching it for Stanford, or I'm watching the Harvard channel, or, ultimately as I guarantee we'll see instructors begin to come onto these channels and deliver courseware. This will evolve, but I think it's all part of Google's invasion of our television and our entertainment lives, which I'm fine with. I know some people aren't, but I have no problem with it. So it's just more variety.
Still have this sentence in mind that by mid-2012, half of homes will have in some way Google TV in their homes. So I'm pretty excited and wait or cannot wait to see how Google is going to do that. But it doesn't seem to be as unrealistic anymore as maybe some weeks ago. So
No, I think especially as if you accept that TV isn't necessarily just TV anymore. It could be what you have on your tablet that you're watching. It can be there's lots of ways of accessing content via Google channels. But Android is everywhere, and the set-top boxes are kind of making a resurgence. They're integrating now with the televisions themselves. So you buy a TV or a DVR or a Blu-ray player, Android's in there. So, smart folks.
And of course, we still have this little project some people at Apple are working on, part-time project or not. We will see about a new Apple TV as well.
Yeah, that's coming too. And then I'll probably go buy one.
Chris, what are you up to? I think we can soon expect an article if Christopher Dawson were about to
start
found a startup.
I'm a startup. Yeah, that's. I hope that's going to come out this afternoon. Actually, it's my little weekend piece. Because of course, all this talk of startups this week, I always have these little ideas. Like I said, I've got lots of ideas, but no follow through. But I have lots of thoughts, and I think a lot of us who are in education have spent some time in this space. We all think of ways that we could do things better. So that's coming this afternoon on ZDNet, and I'll get that out there. And then I think we'll have actually some cool stuff coming up on the WizIQ blog too, talking about ways to actually make use of WizIQ from a business perspective. So, an online teaching business, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how you can teach online and actually make some money doing it there.
Oh, I have to follow up on that, although my active teaching career online, due to EduQuest and the writing, has come to an end, but it's still interesting, of course, to see what people do and really make. I hope that more and more people will be able to make a living teaching online, and I think it's a great opportunity.
It is.
And from my side, I think probably this weekend as well that I want to write a piece about kids who love their robot teachers, and talk a little bit more about the technology going in that direction of
Excellent.
Yeah. So
Cool.
all right, Chris. Thank you so much. It was, as always, an insightful and fun talk with you. At Mr. Data HS on Twitter, otherwise, of course, on ZDNet and on the WizIQ blog.
Of course.
And myself at Kirsten Winkler. My personal blog has the same name, and otherwise at EduQuest.
Very good. Very good. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend as well, Chris. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.